the propaganda that we hear over and over about man and his far away, abstract, far removed religious ideas that come from this word, the words that were preserved, and because he reads them and he thinks, I need to mold myself into that word, he figures out these formulaic ideas, these rules that need to be followed. And these ideas about sin and sinfulness, sinful nature that people don't relate to, they don't understand because they don't understand what that means. Because primarily, everyone, because of that same drive that we have to be able to look at and see and examine and face to face, look at it, see what's inside us and understand what's inside us, and don't be afraid to lift it up and look at it and deal with it and be honest about what we truly are, what really happens in ourselves. What's really inside of us is that need, that craving that drives us in all kinds of different, very complex ways. Very complex and always working. It is that need, that craving to get something, to have something, to work for something or to steal something so that we can have it because it makes us feel a certain way. And that's what greed really is. That's where greed comes from. Not some far removed idea of just greed by itself. It's driven by these very complex instinctual drives, and the drive behind the drive is that need to survive, and behind that, encased within that need to survive, is this idea not that we're sinners, but that we're good, because that's the only way that we would really always consistently be driven or agree with that drive that's in us to survive, as if we felt like we were good enough to do that, or worthwhile to be able to continually engage ourselves in that mode of survival all the time, as if that feeling of inherent goodness was what was driving it, what was coupled with it. The feeling of inherent goodness that is always in us makes us say, I'm not a sinner, I'm good. So when somebody proposes, you're a sinner and you need to be saved, we might say with our mouth, yes, I want to be saved, I want to go to heaven, so I accept Jesus because I'm a sinner and I need to be saved. People don't believe that when they say it. People don't believe that when they don't say it, because those are abstract ideas. They're far removed from our actual experience. They're far removed from what actually lives inside our heart, what really makes us wrong according to God. The fact that we're common animals and we all listen to the same voice of instinct, which really is that talking snake, which really is that adversary, that devil, that Satan. Not some entity with its own will that's flying around, but some very powerful and persistent force that's just always there. What it really is, in the end, in the very overarching thing that it is defined as, the most general definition is us doing our own purpose, us doing our own will, And that's how it makes sense. Because when we're constantly and continually doing our own will, because we're constantly and continually and consistently listening to that voice that's speaking to us, and we don't even know it's speaking to us, we are constantly doing our own will. And we are continually throughout the day just doing our will, promoting ourselves, promoting our existence, getting more stuff for ourselves, making ourselves feel more secure, strategizing about how to make our own purpose better, more profound. We're constantly doing our own will and purpose because we're constantly listening to that voice. That's the adversary. And it's adversarial because when we're constantly doing that, it means that we cannot be doing God's will, the Father's purpose. And that is where the words start making sense. When you start reading about the Son of God in that light, and you start comprehending that this devil, that this Satan that was standing in front of him wasn't some entity with a will of its own, some bad God trying to persuade him to do bad things. It was the same animal voice that we constantly listen to all the time. It was inside his thoughts, and it was trying to persuade him in his own thoughts about which way to go. The same way that it constantly talks, not as some entity speaking, not as some actual animal speaking metaphorically, the snake, the serpent that slithers in and slithers up and slithers around in our mind and our heart and begins to speak to us and tells us, do this, keep doing this, get that, indulge in that, you want that, get that for yourself. You need that. You feel insecure, you need to secure that for yourself, so you do it. You got to do it or you're going to die. Snake. The metaphor. That thing. That ubiquitous voice. Instinct. And another way that it can start to make sense is by seeing it in the animals, and that's why they're there. They're there to look at, they're there to observe, they're there to understand and comprehend how they are so incredibly driven by instinct. And how, once we see how perfectly animals are driven by this instinct to be what they are and do what they do and act as they act so perfectly, then we can start to imagine ourselves being infested by the same ubiquitous sort of voice. That voice that tells us, that shows us, that teaches us how to promote ourselves. Because that's really all the animals are doing.